Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lee Burton with Naturalist Studies, and we have another podcast episode. This time I have the pleasure of having in studio Chris Hyde. He is the owner and the founder of Natureversity, based here in Austin, Texas. So thank you for joining us, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm so excited to be here. I love chatting with more nature nerds and hearing all their stories. So I'm excited to pick your brain too, and this goes both ways.
Well, thanks for being here. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, Chris, is obviously my business and trying to get people more involved in and connected to nature and the whole idea of being a naturalist. And someone like yourself, I think, is about as good an example of that as you can get. Very well-rounded, very diverse skill set. So if you don't mind just kind of rehashing your upbringing, how you got into this, the things that really appeal to you, your core skills and what motivates you today.
Yeah, I like that you're calling it naturalist, first of all. Sorry, side bit here. Here's why. Because so many survival schools, or I should say outdoor schools, wilderness education schools, they have that demeanor of like survival, like slash and grab, bushcraft. And I like that you went naturalist. Here's why. Because if you were to say, all right, Chris, you're going to bet on this naturalist and this survivalist and who's going to survive longer, I'd probably pick the naturalist. And the reason why is because the naturalist doesn't have to know how to build forts, right? The naturalist knows where the deer go when it's wet and cold and raining, right? And so I always defer to the people who have a connection with the land-based first versus the people who popped open a book and went and tried to do the slash and grab survival, chop down trees, make forts thing. So thank you for calling it naturalist studies, because I think that's so astute and so much more appropriate to what we're actually trying to do as environmentalists, as educators, as bioremediation facilitators. So how I got started in all this was I was born in San Antonio, Texas. I grew up in Austin, but I did have a little stint in Savannah, Georgia, Corpus Christi, a few other places, Florida. And during those times, I was outside all the time. And the beach was just so much heaven. It was like fishing and, catching whatever I could find out there. Seashells, collections, all that. So I knew from a very early age, because my grandparents, they would, basically say, hey, go outside and play. And I did. And then as I got older, I realized as in middle school and high school that I wasn't the cool kid, because I was into nature and stuff like that. But then I quickly dropped all that. And I was like, all right, I'm going to be cool and listen to Marilyn Manson and Korn and all the skateboards. And I did all that. But I felt...
So you were an urban survivalist for a while.
Yeah. Right, like street kid. And I felt disconnected. And it wasn't just because of school or lack of quality friends or mom or dad or anything. I legitimately felt this yearning of go live like a native, go live like a person who's indigenous or something. And I just wanted that so bad. And funnily enough, during high school, I got Dr. Gary Wells. He was a economics professor of mine. And we talked a lot of conspiracies. So I got into conspiracies big time. And I remember a friend of mine, Harlan, and another friend of mine, John Bush, they organized this bookstore called Brave New Books in downtown Austin off the drag. And they were doing a new grand opening. And I brought dozens of boxes of books, this box as big as this box next to me filled with books. But on my way out, they had this little survival section. And I was like, hey, Harlan, I was like, I'm going to take this book. And it was the book Grandfather by Tom Brown. And I don't know why, but I read that back of that book and I was like, I'm taking this one book. I just gave you $500. I'm going to take this one. And I went home and I just absorbed that book, and I knew right then and there that's what was missing.
Wow. So you could have gone the Alex Jones route.
I could have.
In Austin.
Yeah. I loved Alex Jones.
You found Tom Brown.
In the day. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
David
That's a
Icke
great
and
story.
all those guys. But I felt that was I don't want to say rabble rousing, but it was very it was very divisive in a way. And I know that when I started learning these survival skills, when I got done reading Grandfather and I went to tracker school up in Jersey and I met Tom and I met all these people, I realized like this is what I want to do. And so I started hoarding knowledge and gaining all these skills. And then I was like, I'm going to live on my own. And that was the epiphany. I, had a little bit of a vision quest moment, sat in the woods for a few days.
And how long ago was this? Roughly.
2012.
Okay.
Somewhere
about
in there.
10 years ago.
Yeah. So 2010 is when I first went to tracker school. And then 2012 was when I started down this path of like helping people reconnect. But I was out in California, and I decided that I just wasn't going to come back to the world. I had read a lot of those Derek Jensen books. I don't know if you know that guy. He's like wrote in Language Older Than Words and a couple books like that. But I really resonated with his philosophy of connecting with the earth. But during that little moment of the vision quest, I had an epiphany of, wait a second, this is not right. These skills, all that you've learned, this was only for one thing, uniting communities. And here you are hoarding this knowledge, extracting it out of these places where you gained it. And now you're, secluding yourself into the woods. And I couldn't do it.
I'm really glad you brought that up because, and one of the reasons I started naturalist studies was this isn't the domain of any one ethnic group or culture or, it's all of humanity, right?
We're all born of the earth.
Yeah. Everybody, whatever point you want to go back, at some point your ancestors were hunter-gatherers, right?
That's right.
And so it's all in our DNA. And just one comment earlier, what you said, I really like the name naturalist too. And part of the reason I stumbled on that was some of the John Young, his early recordings, and of course he was, probably the foremost student of Tom Brown, and then formed Wilderness Awareness School and all these other spinoffs. That's something that he used, and not only used, he recognized the value of it. And as I started thinking about that more, it's so true. It's all the natives, indigenous people were naturalists because you had to be. You had to know. I mean, took my daughter down to the creek a few days ago. I take her down there a bunch, and we found a walnut, fell off a tree, took it back home, and I had a little piece of wood that was carved she was using for like a spatula. And I was like, well, let's peel the fruit off here, and, made this amazing stain on there. It was beautiful, right? And that's just, we did it for fun. I wanted to teach her, but, they had to do that for survival, right? They needed to know skills like that and everything. And then as I got older, and like the early here Texans who came over and documented the landscape here, and you just start reading about them. And I lived in China for 2 years, and there was a famous Austrian-American named Joseph Rock, and, he collected all these amazing plants, which so many of them, the azaleas and the rhododendrons, come from there in southwest China, Himalayan China. And so, it just encompasses everything. So anyway, I'm really glad to hear you say that, and kind of that appealed to you as well.
Yeah, it does. Naturalism is just... like you said, there's no way to get away from it. You cannot. One of the old things that one of my teachers said I thought was really hysterical is he's like, you can't live in a parking lot. You just can't.
No.
It's impossible. And like you said, we're all needing these resources. And I think therein lies the desire for that connection. So like you said you pulled this, walnut shell off and you used it as a stain. But think about that. Like, for just a moment, if we're talking about hunter-gatherers here, we're talking about the desire to have your needs met while not also expending all your energy. But that's weird, because what is that walnut stain? How is that resupplying your energy? It's not. But there's a deeper level there. That's what I think that's what makes us human, is the ability to, like, knowingly, actively attempt to leave a legacy. They walked miles for cave painting materials. They're not bringing back food and stuff. Maybe they were. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I'm just assuming that these cave paintings and these etchings and all that stuff, they wanted to tell their story. And the other day we were having a conversation.
Or if you go like the Galt site, which is dating back to 20,000 years ago, they have, I can't remember the exact technical term or archaeological term, but they call them show-off points. It's like this arrowhead is like, it's not functional. I mean, it would break off chip here. Someone had some extra time. So, you're exactly right.
Yeah, getting eccentric.
Or the Chauvet caves in France, like 35,000 years ago, and they look like Monet paintings.
That blows my mind. Yeah. What was that lady's name? Jean Ayul? She wrote a whole book about that, like Land of the Cave Bear, or Clan of the Cave Bear. So I feel like we need connections now more than ever, because of obviously everything going on culturally around the world. It is a massive amount of division, but I feel, you can't begin to know like true connections until you know connections with things, that aren't going to serve you. Like, I don't know, I don't want to say that in a derogatory sense, but serve you in the perception that you may have via your culture. So the tree, right? Yes, they give us oxygen, they may give us food, they may give us things, but think about it like this. If you come home and you've got a dog at home and you open that door, what's that dog doing? It's demanding your attention left and right. And you got to give it, you got to acknowledge it, because it's not going to stop until you acknowledge it. Just imagine if trees and plants did that to us when we walked out our front door. We would know them all very well, because they're demanding our attention. So we have to be the active force that goes out there and demands, their attention, I guess, or let me just tell you how much I honor you by this stain that you're giving me, or this nut, this protein, this bark, this beautiful wood, this bow potentially that can then go harvest more sustenance for myself and enrich my life. So I want people to stem from the naturalist via the route of making deeper connections. And I love what John Young said. Maybe it was John Young. I don't know. Who they talked about in Africa, there were people who kind of surmised life as though there was threads connecting them to everything. And when you were born, it was like this tiny little meager thread of connection to maybe the tree or the plant or the animal. But as you grew up, that thread became like a rope. And as you got older and into your elderhood, it became like an unbreakable chain. And think about the chains that people have. And when you walk around, like, look at someone, who cares who they are or whatever, just look at them. And then in your mind, like, wonder, what are their tethers? What are their chains? It's probably this phone right here, right? Or a car or a bank account or, whatever is making up your identity. But is it really with the moon phase right now? Right, which direction you're looking, what season are blackberries in, like anything. I don't know. There's just more. I feel more human by knowing those things. I guess what I'm trying to say.
No, I think that's great. My favorite example of that is a story by Klaus Zuberbuehler, and it's called or I've nicknamed it anyway, the 11th Primate, and he was doing some. He's anthropologist of some sort, I believe. He's University of Scotland and in Edinburgh. Anyway, he was doing research. I think it was in Ivory Coast or somewhere over in one of the rainforest countries in Africa, and studying calls from certain leopards. And I won't blow the story, but anyway, at the end of it, he has this epiphany moment. And what he realized was, when he was able to start interpreting these, is that humans are, even today, even if you're just out walking the pavement, like where we are here in downtown Austin, you're in relationship to these things. You may not know it, but you are. You're just not aware of it. And when you become aware of it, and that's what you're saying, is that it's a game changer, and again, it's in our DNA. So just getting back to the Tom Brown thing, when did you, I know you're an excellent tracker and you have the highest level of cyber tracker certification, you're a specialist. How did you get into specific skill sets like tracking and wilderness survival? Where did you learn those, and how did that come about?
When I got to tracker school, it was all about survival. And then in the third week was this class called Advanced Tracking and Awareness.
This is at Tom Brown School,
right? Up in Jersey. Yeah. And that class kind of it gave me an understanding and kind of a pseudo perception of what tracking was, but I really didn't get into tracking until I got to Dave Scott with Earth Native. I didn't really understand until I started studying what Louis Liebenberg was doing, what Paul Resendez was doing, what Mark Elbrock was doing. That's when I started realizing, okay, this is science tracking. Because some of the things that Tom would do, I'll never forget. We were in California during this time when he did this to me, but we were up on this hill, and he kind of moved away some dirt and some leaves and was like, "This is a 2-year-old weasel track," and I was just like, I want to say that's really neat, but I also want to ask, what is the practical application for that?
I had a similar experience. I won't name the school, but up in the Northwest near.
No, I'm not bad mouthing his school. I just genuinely
I
wanted to. Okay,
so we found a raccoon track, and someone says, "Oh, look the way the leaf is bent here. It had a liver problem or something."
Oh yeah.
So
no, I think tracker school is great, in all areas, but when it comes to the data collection and the research collection, I would say research grade collection of inventorying, like clear print, foot morphology and all that stuff to inventory and help biologists and research field analysts, I think they kind of missed the mark because they're more into like this spiritual tracking, which I think is applicable. I really do. I think first of all, Louis Liebenberg hit the nail on the head when he said the quote, science, or tracking is the oldest form of art, science, and language, right? And I really think that is practical. But when it comes to the spiritual tracking stuff, I think it's just different. It's like inner tracking and healing our whatever trauma and like keeping track of like how we felt when that emotion arose from that person saying that thing. That is what I think like spiritual tracking is to me. But physical tracking with animals and wildlife, you got to get down and like do the nitty-gritty toes, digits, mesio webbing, distal webbing. Like, you got to get into all that.
My class is like University of Florida and Idaho. I stick to that.
Yeah, good.
But it is interesting that, it means, again, the connection part and the relationship part. Everyone draws something. Well, there's all a commonality in it, I think, but everyone has a little bit different aspect on that.
Sure.
It's a personal journey. But anyway, I'm glad to hear you say that, because there's been, obviously, in the last 10 years or so, and really Mark Elbrock here in North America really is the one, I think, that led that. But it really is a science.
It is.
So, from 100%. Your perspective, why do you think, let's say I'm a biologist out there, or I'm concerned about the environment, environmentalist, whatever, why is tracking, you think, relevant to that, or why is it important?
Well, think about it. First of all, it's like a non-invasive approach to cataloging and inventorying animals, right? So if you can figure out, hey, there's, 2 beavers and 3 kits living over there, and you don't have to destroy their dam to do that, that's great, right? It's less I'm just trying to blank on a word. Less kind of like assaulting
invasive.
their life. Yeah, less invasive. Yeah, less...
not intrusive.
Right, messing with their home and their potential food source or whatever it may be. That's like the first thing. But the other thing is just, to me, it's such a humbling experience when I know there's golden eagles flying around the Yellowstone River. But, when you get to see them flying, it's totally different than when you see them right there on the ground next to you. And I don't know, seeing a track like in front of my face 2 feet away while I'm looking at it, it's just this sense of, wow, like this animal is standing right here and so am I. And maybe that's woo-woo for some people, but I like that connection. But for the biologist, I would say it just helps understand more ecological awareness. How does the golden eagle living here factor into the river and the quality and the healthcare of the streams of fish and all that different stuff? Is there anything tangible that can be extracted from this wildlife tracking research that can then in turn help us do better conservation efforts in ecology? So that would be the big one for me. And the other thing for biologists is like when you're going out and you're leading like citizen science research things. I know a lot of biologists are in charge of doing like field studies and you're bringing the general public out. It's so much neater if you explain ecology through the world of tracking, because you can talk about bird language, for instance. That's tracking. Really, it is.
Tracking in real time.
In real time, exactly. Like understanding the ebb and the flow of the world around you at any given moment. But yeah, I love that basic. Let me say it this way. I had a student one time named Felicia, and Felicia signed her son up for my tracking class, and just wanted him to be in it, but he was young and he was a little bit hesitant. He was like 12 or 13. And she was like, I'm going to take this. I have no concerns on tracking. I don't care. And after the first day, she came up to me and she was like, I did not know that it was this exciting. I did not know that it was this interesting. I didn't know it was this fun. I didn't know that there was these questions that could be asked like this, like how, all of these things, like what is this hawk eating on the side of the riverbank right here? Why are these 2 crawfish claws sitting here? Who did this? Who's responsible? And she just felt, when she left that day, the millions and millions of moments that she had missed out on when she went on, vacations with family or whatever, and just how many questions now is she going to ask herself about the natural world now that she's got that lens of tracking?
It's amazing. I'm glad to hear you say that. I give an assignment to my students at the end of each semester, and a few questions. They have to write an essay, and part of it is what did you learn, and I get that answer so often. I had no idea, or I was a guide in a national park last summer. Now I know what I'm missing, or I'm doing it right now, and I've been able to incorporate this, or I had no idea. I thought I would just be learning some morphology, and so I think it absolutely is twofold. Just like you said, there's a sort of excitement that you're able to start connecting all these pieces or these threads. I love the way you said that, and it's an eye-opener. And I tell people, and, until you do it, you can't really appreciate this, but it just opens up a whole new world. You realize what you've been missing, right? But there's also a hardcore science component, or there can be. And, the work I've done and previously, and being a program manager for a conservation organization, you can't collar every animal, right? And you can't always collect DNA. And, Mark Elbrock with, I think, Panthera now, he's doing a number of scientific studies on mountain lions, I think other species. But there's been some discoveries made because, you may not be able to find a species, but if you know what to look for, you may find it somewhere else.
Exactly.
And actually that can spawn research opportunities.
Yeah.
My professor, Dr. Katie Sieving, University of Florida, in bird language, she actually pioneered one of her grad students with figuring out that parrots, and not parrots, but parrots, which are titmice and chickadees, they are the guardians of the forest, like in the entire whole Arctic region, every continent, literally, except for a couple of small areas in Africa, or excuse me, in South America. All the other birds listened to them. And the reason she did that was because one of her students was paying attention why pishing wasn't working in the Amazon. And turns out they don't have any titmice and chickadees there. And so anyway, that's a whole nother long story. But because of that, they started doing recordings, and they figured out, well, pishing is the same acoustical signature as it is what the chickadee call, or chickadee call, and that's why it attracts birds. And it anyway launched this whole research. They figured out how to break down these calls and analyze them, figure out which predator that they're referring to. So yeah, I just love hearing you say that there is a scientific aspect to it.
Oh yeah. I'll just, you said for the biologist and I'm going to say, here's my story for the layman. For the person listening right now, and you're like, I'm not a biologist. How am I going to use tracking in my life? Check this story out. So I, as a kid growing up, loved detective stories. I loved all that stuff. So I think naturally that's why I gravitated towards tracking, was because it was fun and you got to solve little mysteries. Well, I had a roommate a long time ago. I would say maybe 2012 or something. Anyway, I went to Big Bend. I was gone maybe 10 days. Trash day was like, Tuesday or something like that. I get back. It's, Wednesday or Thursday. So, trash is bad. Trash is been collected, yada, yada, yada. And so I'm super passionate. I come back from Big Bend. I'm really inspired. I'm excited. And I go looking for this book that I cannot find anywhere on my shelf. And I started noticing, like, wait a second, a couple of other books are gone. Like, what's going on? So I go into my garage and I look up on this shelf, and I have this huge box of nature books. And I open that up, and there's like nothing in it. And I'm like, what? So I'm like, hey, to my roommate, I'm like, hey, what's going on here? And he was like, oh, yeah, man. He goes, listen to me. He goes, I'm so sorry. He's like, I was trying to mow the front yard, and I pulled your box of books down to get some stuff from behind it. And when I was like filling the gasoline in the mower, it spilt all over those books. And I got rid of all of them. He's like, I threw them all in the trash. And I was like, well, but wait. I was like, I left. I was like, so the trash should still be there. So I go look in the trash. There's no books. Okay. But here's the funny thing, right? And this is where we're getting into this detective tracker brain. I was like, this garage doesn't smell like gas. All these things you're telling me, none of this is adding up. And then come to find out, we don't even have a lawnmower. It's like, what is this story? So I go and I drive down the road to this place called Half Price Books on South Lamar. And I go walk in there, and I was like, hey, this is going to be really weird. I was like, but I'm looking for a big box of books. They're all nature books. There's a lot of survival books in there. And on the inside cover, it'll say see Hyde. And he was like, oh my God, yeah, we have all those. And I was like, you got to be kidding. He's like, no, look, here they all are. And I was like, oh my God.
We'll give you a good deal on them.
Yeah, it's basically a police officer had to come and say this is part of a theft. You got to give these back to this guy. So that's what he had done. My roommate stole all these really rare nature books and then, sold them to half-price books. And unfortunately, but I think I might have bought his story had I not had that tracker brain. I think I like all the moments where you have relationships where people are either not being faithful or you have a friend who might be, I don't want to say lying, but maybe manipulating or something like that. Tracking gives you those perceptions of those inlets to be like, no, that doesn't make sense. And I never understood that metaphor out on a limb until I started tracking. And so one time Dave said to me, he's like, that's going out on a limb. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, the trunk's strong. You got a good case here, 4 toes, claws, webs, etc. He's like, but now you're just saying nonsense and you're out here on this limb. So I want people to, like CyberTracker does such a great job of, have an open, honest dialogue about what is being viewed.
You got to prove your case.
You got to prove your case. You're like a little attorney out there in the field. Remember that time we were at Big Bend with that specialist and we all got into it about what was it?
They can get pretty heated. Was it cicada or egg case?
That was the one out at Pace Bend Park.
Yeah,
that was that poop of the frass of the walking stick or whatever. But the one where we were all in Big Bend, were you there? Maybe you were just helping.
I don't think I was at that one. I think I've seen a video.
Oh, we got into a heated one about the Zenaida dove poop versus the Roadrunner poop. Right. Oh my God, it was
so people are listening, probably going,
"What are you talking about?" So CyberTracker International is an organization that evaluates your ability to possess ecological wisdom. So animal tracks, trailing, things such as that. And they bring out the best of the best biologists, people like Casey McFarland and Marcus Rainerson.
It's the top gun.
Yeah, those are the big guys. Yeah. So if you want to put your skills to the test, take a CyberTracker test. And I will just tell you this, even if you have no skills, you will learn so much about animal tracking within those 2 days of signing up for a CyberTracker test.
Just animal behavior.
Yeah, everything. Yeah. They go through everything. Why is this turtle trying to crawl up the wall? Well, about 3 weeks ago, the water in this pond was actually full, but it has since dried up, and that's why those scratches are on the wall. And you're like, whoa, hold on. That makes a lot of sense. It's like evidence at face value, and that's why I like tracking so much, because it gives you a tool belt to analyze. And more recently, there's this book, I can't think of the woman's name right now, but the book is called Scout Mindset. That book, if you're a tracker, read the Scout Mindset. That's such a great
I haven't seen that one. I'm glad you said that. The thing I tell my students, a lot of them, is, and it goes along with this, it's so good to develop, we're in this world of AI, right?
Yeah,
artificial intelligence, which is, and I have an IT background, most of it's based on neural networks or pattern matching. Tracking is so good at developing pattern matching, and bird languages as well. And it just helps you in your everyday life. I mean, I know it can sound kind of foo-foo, but it's really not, in terms of being able to piece things together and just develop that part of your brain. I guess that would be more right brain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of the creative or more abstract. But again, with the real practical aspect. So let me just change subjects a little bit here. What about some of the other skills? Because I know you're very adept. I know you do a lot of different things, and from doing primitive cooking and pottery. I know you're a good plant guy. Where does wilderness survival fit into this? And again, that's big now. Last 10, 15 years, we've had all these wilderness shows on TV and, Man versus Wild or whatever it is, right? And they're fun and all that. And people are really attracted to it, I think, because it just kind of calls something, sort of primitive back in us. Or could if I, but in terms of actual, practicality, can you talk a little about, if I were coming to you just off the street, or you're talking to a businessman or woman or whomever, why should they be interested in wilderness survival or some of the things that you learn when you undertake that or take a course?
I think wilderness survival is like the pinnacle of self-reliance. If you can just walk out into the woods naked and take care of yourself, like, the amount of freedom that you feel while doing that is so, I don't want to unironically say liberating, but that's what it is. It's very freeing to know I don't need anything. I mean, obviously rocks, water, community, and things like that you need because you're a human being, but to not have to go to the store, to not have to go, try and barter or something along those lines. It's just, to me, it's a sense of freedom. I really just want to say freedom, because I know, these impossible food shortages and this, that, and the other, and all these things circulating around the news. And it's like, that's fear-driven stuff to me. That's that cycle of get into this lower vibrational mindset, and rather than going there, alleviating that concern at all by practicing tracking, right? Understanding ecology, where do deer go when they're tired and wet and cold and hungry and all that, and then you can build potentially a shelter there or go there. Where are the birds getting their water? It's all of it is encased in itself, I feel. And that's what I want to give these kids, is a sense of self-reliance at my school. So, because I'm not a parent. I'm not a dad. I'm not a mom. I don't have kids.
Yeah, let's talk about
own.
that. That was the next thing I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Is we'll get back to survival thing, but on the kids front, why do you think this is so important for just kids in general? Regardless of the time period, but also today.
I was going to say that the alleviating the concern about like this. I mean, you and I, we're close in age, and I grew up riding my bike around and going 10, 20 miles away from home. That was just the thing that we did. Nobody questioned it. Nobody cared. And today, kids don't do that. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give kids a sense of self-reliance so that their parents can feel fine. That's the big thing. When I ask families all the time, I say, why aren't you allowing your kids to go out there? Oh, well, I'm worried. Oh, you're worried. Oh, it's not that your child's worried and your child has confidence. That really upsets me when I teach a child about, hey, these are Texas persimmons, Diospyros texana. They're wonderful little jellies they're like chocolate pudding almost. And you can paint with them, and the seeds are cool, and you can do this. And then the kids go to show their parents, like, to slap their hand and tell them, don't touch that. You don't know what it is. And they're like, I learned from Natureversity. Like, what are you saying? Don't touch it. And I find that when the parents discover, whoa, I don't have to be as hyper, watchful of my child, because they have a sense of right, wrong, hazards. Oh, no, that's not a dangerous snake. I can recognize all the identifying marks. I can pick that up. It's just a way, once again, this whole conversation started to connect. And so handling frogs and toads and snakes, that's one more layer of connection. It is so primal. It's like pulling a bow back and letting it go the first time, or starting a fire. You want to do it. I think we have thousands of years of evolution to capture animals and just see them and, obviously eat them. But that's what I want. I want to give kids that sense so that parents have a sense of freedom. That's creating freedom.
That's a great way of viewing it. And John Young, his work and other people have shown, like Sam Bushman.
Yeah.
And just studies that, in fact, my wife and I have been listening to his book. Hunt, Gather, Parent, I believe is the name of it.
Oh, what a cool name.
Yeah, it's really good about,
Hunt, Gather, Parent.
Yeah, trying to.
Perfect.
Because there's this view of, and we've heard it in, not to get in politics, but, in recent years about tribal mindset and tribal culture. And of course, there can be a downside of that. But there's also, I think it's given a bad name, because we know through research now, studies, that, for instance, kids in a lot of these tribal cultures are much more independent in a good way, self-sufficient, and just at peace, relaxed, don't have the anxiety. And I think a lot of it is because of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that as a society, we need to kind of go back to that and relook at that. I highly recommend that book, by the way.
Yeah.
If you have a young child or one
Hunt, Gather, Parent.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
What we're talking about, just primitive skills and survival. I was reading this book the other day. What was it called? It's like the person who first ate like a clam or something like that. It's a book about the firsts, the everything. And in like chapter 2 or 3, it is about like the very first invention. And I don't know how accurate this is, but according to this book, it was a mother who could not carry her baby. So it was a sling. It's like the very first thing, because she had to alleviate these hands to go do stuff. So I just thought that was so amazing. And so when I tell kids stories about like these stone tools and like all this and how cool it is, and I was like, they're like, yeah, like first inventions. And I was like, well, was it? Maybe it was. I wasn't there, so I don't really know. But I like the thought of hold on, let's walk this through, shall we? I'm holding a child. Can I break 2 stone tools while holding a child? No. So what am I going to do first? Oh, I got a little sling, put the child back, bam. And then the kid's like, that does kind of make sense. So I love telling the kids this origins of the first things. And I don't know if that story is true about the baby sling, but if it is, that's really cool.
Well, that's a little bit like form follows function, right? So
yes, exactly.
The other thing, when you were talking about the survival, I always think there's 2 aspects to it. One is, you mentioned, it is kind of fun. I used to do a lot of backpacking and don't near as much anymore with 2 young kids. But, when I would go out and do it, even though, I have a modern pack and all these things, if you just know some things or you run across a persimmon, right? Or the other day I did a, black walnut, it's like, you're out there to have fun, right? Or we used to make pine needle tea all the time, which has vitamin C and
super
it's great.
Good for you.
If you're cold, really good for you. There's just all these little things, but then there's a useful aspect as well. If something happens, something breaks, and you don't have parachute cord or whatever. Granted, it takes a while, but if you have to make some cordage or obviously navigation, and so. There's a real useful aspect of being able to get you out of trouble or at least avoid the worst scenarios a lot of times. And so I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And, it's a win-win, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's fun or really a triplicate. It's fun. It connects you to nature, and then it could save your life.
Literally, yeah. And it's neat, too, because I think kids... we had this little boy named Zach who came to us one summer, and Zach was not fast. He wasn't, strong. He wasn't, what all the kids would be like, yeah, that's the cool kid. He was quiet and reserved and had big, thick bottom glasses. And when it came time to do capture the flag and things like that, nobody picked Zach. But Zach was really keen on bird language. So I gave him a copy of John Young's book. I was like, this is what the robin knows. And he only came to us for summer. He came to us to visit with his grandparents, so he would come to our camps. And I remember he left one summer, and he came back the next summer. And boy, howdy, he had digested that book and just practiced so much with these bird languages that when he came to Texas, he was like, yeah, I could kind of apply that. That cardinals, I have that in my Pennsylvania town. Oh, the robin, I have that too. So he's just started going through and making a checklist of all the birds that were similar. And when we got to go play Capture the Flag, he, got picked last and wasn't a big deal, but no one could capture their flag because he'd be like, guys, there's somebody coming on this side. That bird just alarmed. And then it became this fight for who Zach's got onto what team because they know you weren't going to score a point because Zach's going to tell you, hey, there's 2 coming down that trail. Send 2 scouts that way. Send 1 defender this way. Block here. It was all led by him. So what I'm saying is that survival skills don't just give you a sense of cool or a sense of whatever. It gives you a sense of self-confidence. And that's what I think kids need these days. The reason they're turning to all this TikTok and how many followers you've got and it's who gives a turd about that stuff. I don't care, but what can you do? What can you help with? How can you? And when kids see other kids rubbing sticks together or carving with a knife or throwing sticks or shooting aces, at targets and all that, suddenly they see whoa, that's cool. I want to be able to do that. And if that child is in a good place, who's good at these skills, can kind of take on a little mentoring / role model approach, it gives them even more of a sense of good self-confidence. Think about you when you became a teacher. It felt good to impart wisdom to others. It boosted your morale, and you carry that morale throughout the rest of your world and in other relationships because you're walking around with a not like a ego that's inflated, but a good sense of pride about who you are and what you know and what you love. And you just become this real passionate individual. And I like the quote. It sums up really well. Set yourself on fire with your passion and watch as the world gathers around you to enjoy your light. That's the best way that I want to give these kids an opportunity. And so Zach, he wasn't fast, he wasn't strong, but he had a gift. He could recognize patterns, and he could see shifts, and he could see changes. And I said, that's okay. We'll go there. And
what a beautiful story.
Yeah, it was definitely changed my life too. Just hearing how his parents told me he is not afraid anymore at school. Like, kids don't pick on him because he has this sense of, well, I don't really care that you think I'm a dork or whatever. He's like, because I can save myself in the woods. And when it comes time to that might happening to you, we'll see who's asking for whose help here. And that's okay. I'm still going to be humble. I'm still going to be empathetic towards your plight. Zach was a wonderful young boy who
be interesting to track him throughout his life.
Yeah. I would. If you're listening to this podcast, Zach, and you know who I'm talking about, I don't remember his last name. I want to say it started with an R, but I don't know that for sure. So, yeah, if you're out there, contact me. We want to check in with how you're doing.
That's, again, another really good point. Our society, and, we hear messaging otherwise, but there's such this push to go in certain direction, and whether it become, and again, I'm not knocking it. We need them in our society, but, whether it's doctor, lawyer, computer programmer, whatever it is. And a lot of kids who, either don't have skills in that or just it's not what they want to do, feel kind of left out. And, whereas, and I talked to my wife about this, again, this goes back to that book, Hunt, Gather, Parent. She brings this up. When you're in smaller culture like that, it does two things. One is it's inclusive, and like you said, they find something they're good at.
Yeah.
And it's a needed skill or a task that needs to be done because you're in small groups of people. I mean, even if it's a village with, a few dozen or 100 people, it's still, you don't have that much labor. So everybody's got to pitch in. And so kids get, a sense of self-worth from that. But also, they're more likely going to end up at some point doing something that everybody really needs.
Yeah.
And, so it fulfills a role. An important role. And I think that's so key. And there's so many spinoffs of that, and not always, but most people, are good at what they like and like what they're good at. Right.
Yeah.
And so what a great example of that, that you gave there.
And I think it's beyond that too. Like, I tell myself all the time, like, when I, can't get this done. I'm looking for a house right now and I'm like struggling. I'm finding this house hunting process frustrating. And I go back and I look at, okay, I started a nature school. Well, that was hard, but I did it. I rubbed two sticks together. It was hard, but I did it. Like, I just keep going back to all these things and going, if I can do that, like, I can do this. So I want that for kids too. I want that perception to be there in their mind that says, I can make friends. Like, that's not that challenging. I can, whatever, do this dance. I can be a part of this band. I can whatever. Because their sense of self-confidence stems from these connections. I think when you build a life upon deep, meaningful connections, no matter what happens, right? Depression, anxiety, situations with friends or whatever, being ostracized or whoever doesn't like you, you don't ever fall lower than that foundation. You fall back to that foundation. You go back out and say, well, I'm going to go reconnect with my rabbits in my backyard, my birds, and, just find maybe there was some moments where I wasn't being true to myself or not listening to the feedback that I was getting. And then you find that. That's what sit spots are for me so much, is like meditation. Not only just enjoying the birds and, the wildlife around me, but to really like inwardly reflect about who I am and where I'm going and what it is that I want to be doing in this life and how I want to possess myself and carry myself and how I want to show up in the world. And when we do sit spots with the kids, we ask them, hey, what was something neat you saw in nature? And then they're like, oh, this bird or this lizard or whatever it may be. But then we go deeper. Like, what was something, did you feel anything while sitting there that you haven't felt in a long time? They're like, yeah, I kind of felt peaceful. Like, I was like, yeah, you don't need TV and stimuli and 24/7, stuff to be alive. Being alive can just be quiet in the woods with, lizard nearby or a bird chirping. And so it really, for me, it all goes back to self-confidence. I want kids to have self-confidence.
So let me ask you this, that last point you made or brought up there, but play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
We have, I think in recent years, and it goes across many demographics. It's kids, obviously, young professionals, older people, this return to nature. We had the age of industrialization, the technological society, et cetera. But that keeps moving forward.
Yeah.
And, we have 330 million plus people in this country. There's, a lot more coming, right? And there's this kind of movement towards urbanization and smaller footprint and, not getting into all that. But
pod living.
Right. And it's not for me,
No.
but, that's reality. That's, what trying to kind of push people in and, all that stuff, right? So, with that being said, and it's happening, and we know we've seen the shifts. I mean, here in Texas, the small towns way out in West Texas, and they're getting smaller actually, right? Yeah. And the cities and central part of states getting bigger, and that's happening other states as well. How can we, or how can someone like you, move this forward and people get more involved, given that there's this force which is kind of in a sense creating the opposite, where steel and glass and pavement and high rises and hard to have access to land. Especially in a state like Texas, we don't have much public land, right? So
I think we have zero public land, right?
Well, there's some, but state parks and a couple of national parks, but they're Big Bend's 9 hours away where we are right now. But even if you live and let's say out west or somewhere in national forest, you don't own that land. There's some restrictions. And so buying land is very difficult in many cases now and not possible for a lot of people. So how do you see this as, that we can still, get people out and achieve these things and create this culture you're talking about and community and get the intrinsic values of it, given that there's this push to, and you add in all the things you talked about, like TikTok and, whatever's coming down the pike, all the AI stuff, robots, virtual reality, et cetera. Because, personally, I've done some work in virtual reality, and I think it can be a great learning tool, but part of it is also it's problematic for me. I mean, given, and I have to watch my kids. I don't want them on screens or putting the goggles on or what. I want them on the real deal. So what do you have any answers for that or even just comments? Or
I think I tell parents at my school all the time, I say, listen, your kid is never going to remember their best day on an Xbox, but they will remember the day that I taught them to rub two sticks together. So I want to say that there's nothing that is going to replace the tangible connection of holding a snake, looking at animal tracks on the earth, like right there, this animal walked right here. That's amazing to me. So I think as much as they want to try to push this, digital world, I think you're going to get resistance naturally because that's not who we are. We don't have, thousands of years of evolutionary DNA with tech, but we do with nature, and I think that no matter, look at it like this, the people who are pushing that kind of stuff so hard, the resistance they're getting is, I'll give you a great example. There's an organization here in Austin. It's called Exit and Build, right? That is a great example. They are wanting you to alleviate yourself from the concern and the constraints of big ag, big pharma, government, all of that stuff. It's run by John Bush and an amazing group of people over there, Rebecca. And so, check out Exit and Build if you're really interested in this stuff and you're like, is there a practical application measure to what it is that they're talking about on this podcast? Yes, the Exit and Build people, and what they're getting into is how to do gardening on a low scale thing. And so what I mean is, like, if you're a person who's like, I live in the downtown big city, they start with step one. How do you get out of there? Where are you going? What do you want to be a part of an intentional community? Do you want to start your own community? They go and hold your hand like through the process of exiting and building your own thing. So just know that as much push as there is to digitize us, there is so much more push from people like Lee, sitting across from me, and myself, who are out there making sure that people don't lose sight of what got us here, which is the natural world and these connections and pure water to drink and swim in and, birds to sit in the trees and do all that. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't want to doom and gloom it. I don't want to perceive that the digitalized world is going to one day usurp our connection to nature. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're just too much of a wild creature for that. I really do.
I love you saying that, and you're a good example of that because you know your way around high tech, but you're able to still do these things. And it brings up something I think we forget about. You were talking about the parents earlier, and having this kind of anxiety and fear, and I've seen that in my own family as well.
Sure.
About when 70 years ago, you wouldn't have thought anything about your kid going out and running around for a few hours, or even when I was a kid. It's like we went to the local little mountain over here and had our little fort, and made a little fire, cook hot dogs, and my mom didn't even think anything about it, right? She didn't know where we were.
I know.
As long as we came home, it was okay, right?
Or called and checked in.
Yeah, she was glad we left, actually, I think, a lot of times. But anyway, I think one of the things we forget about, though, is that, and of course, at some point, every, country was like this, but we were founded by pioneers. And of course, before we were here, indigenous people were here, but even the settlers, you read, my father-in-law always talking about it. He's from Costa Rica, but his favorite books were Little House on the Prairie and how arduous it was, and going through Wisconsin winters. And so we have this in us, and I think it's always been part of the American ethos. It certainly was Native Americans and the early settlers here. And, whereas, and I lived in Europe for quite a few years, and, I have some beautiful places over there, but that's been very cultured and refined and manicured. Maybe like Eastern Europe's a little bit different, a little wilder there, but, for hundreds of years. And so, thank God that we do still have a lot of wilderness here in the West. It may not be much that's totally untouched, but still we have some amazing places. And I do think it's in our DNA. And so I am hopeful as well. It's why I do what I do, that we don't ever lose that. And because I think it's part of, Americana. And unfortunately, it's not talked about enough, in the lexicon. But I think that's beginning to come back. I think that's why there's so much interest in a lot of these shows. And so I'm really glad to hear you say that. So I just want to let everybody know before we wrap up here, can you tell a little more about Natureversity, the specific programs?
Sure.
When you run them, and I know they're Austin-based, but also people are just interested because, you post stuff online and you have a big online presence, and how they can find out more about you. You have a website. So if you could just kind of delve into that a little bit.
Yeah, so the school's name is Natureversity Outdoor School. You can find us at natureversity.org. That's our website.
What a cool name, by the way. Love that.
I laughed because people I never went to college. I graduated high school and I immediately ran to the woods. And people would ask me when I would go show up to do these lessons and teach park biologists and stuff, animal tracking, they'd be like, "Where'd you go to school?" And I'd be like, "University of Nature." And I just started smashing those words together and saying Natureversity, and it was kind of like a joke at first, but when I actually started the school, I had to call it something, and I was like, I'm just going to call it Natureversity. When I got to hang out with that guy who basically did Richard Louv, who did all the nature deficit disorder.
Oh, you got to spend some time with him.
Yeah, I got to hang out with him, and he told me, he's like, Natureversity. He's like, it's the greatest name for a school ever. He's
fantastic. When was that? When did you meet with him?
He was at the Thinkery. He did a big event at the Thinkery, and I got tickets. I brought all my teachers just to hear him talk, and we got to hang out after the presentation together for a little while.
And Richard Louv is the author of Last
Child in the Woods. Yeah. Vitamin N, bunch of other great books.
Yeah, Nature Deficit Disorder.
That's correct. Yeah. And hearing him say that's the coolest nature school name I've ever heard, I was like, okay, I think I made it in life. I could die tomorrow and say I lived a good life because this guy who I look up to so much said, I love your name of your school. So yeah, that's how it came to be. I really want people to know that we have a lot of summer camps. We have a lot of after-school weekend classes. We have homeschool programs. We pretty much have everything in person. But if you are far and away and listening to this and you would like to do something with us, we do have this thing. It's called the bushcraftadventureclub.com. You can go there and check us out there. That's all of what Mr. Chris does at Natureversity, just presented to children in an online content. It's really neat. It's kind of like Boy Scouts mixed with Girl Scouts, mixed with karate, mixed with I don't know what else.
You're making me want to be a kid again.
Yeah,
wow.
But you start out as what's called an aspirant. And when you sign up, you get a little package in the mail. It's got a white bandana. You wear your white bandana. It's got 10 missions, so you get a mission every week. And then once you're done and you sign off on it and everything's good, you rank up to the yellow belt. right? Now you're an initiate. So it just goes through the yellow or white all the way to black belt. It's the highest rank. It takes about 2 years to do it all. It's one mission per week. And some of them are very difficult. When you get up into the red belt and the brown belt, they get difficult.
This sounds like Tom Brown kind of tasks.
Yeah, they are. They're like, build a fort, sleep in it one night, make an entire meal out of nature, build a bow and arrow, all of the missions. But if you go to bushcraftadventureclub.com, you can check all that out. And then the other thing is, for if you're here and you're listening to this and you're an adult and you want to do some adult stuff with us in person, we have an organization called the Lumber Society, and that is down off of Riverside near 35 at a place called the Buzz Mill Beer and Bar Garden, or bar and coffee shop, sorry. And it's just a lot of fun. I always tell people who want to know more about it, they say, what is it exactly? I say, listen, if you never got a chance to do Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts as a kid, it's that mixed with beer. That's how cool it is. So we're doing all the survival skills, but we're doing it while enjoying some beverages. We're not getting drunk or plastered, but we are having some adult fun time. Leave the kids at home, because this is 21 and up. So.
Well, and I can vouch. I've been down there and known Chris for a number of years. He's a fantastic teacher. And
Thank you.
Very hands-on, great with kids. And, maybe the way to finish this, too, is that when I got into all this before, and I was working in the high-tech world, and I worked with some really good people, but there's just something about the office setting and, because you got your head stuck in a screen or some deadline, it was hard to form good relationships. And, of course, when you left, you either just wanted to get away totally and go have a couple of pints,
Sure.
or, there was this habit of continuing to talk shop. And when I was in Europe, I went, it actually wasn't outdoor skills, but I took a week off and went to a camp sort of thing. It was actually a physical fitness deal. And I just noticed the quality of conversation changed. And within about a week, I just got to know people and feel like I had a good relationship with them. And that I knew better than my friends I'd known for several years when I was living in London. And then a few years later, I went to, and I know you were down there for a while too, Sam Kaufman down in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Human Path. And I I had a buddy, and I'd gone through this already, but he was interested. So we went down there and did a 5-day thing. And just, you're sitting here, you're carving a piece of wood or you're making fire or whatever. The practice itself is meditative.
Oh, yeah.
But you form a relationship. You just kind of have these side conversations. It may be something very different walk of life from you, very different views, politically, whatever, but you actually form a bond. It's very tribal, but in a good way. And so I just say that because Chris is teaching these schools, and even on when he's down there on the Thursday nights, Lumber Society, you get a certain amount of that. You start talking to the person next to you, and I think above all, the relationship aspect. I was a big fan of Into the Wild, the book or the movie, and the kid.
Oh, yeah.
And I know, he was a little bit eccentric and had some issues, but I think that's what he was after. And ultimately, that's really what, his last thoughts he penned before he died was, it was about relationship.
Right.
Happiness is only real when shared.
That's right.
And so I think if you're out there listening, wondering about this, the skills are great. It's really fun. They're practical. There's a scientific aspect. But above all, it's one of the best ways to be in relationship with other people, make new friends, et cetera. And so I can't recommend Chris's organization more highly. And if you get a chance, you're in Austin area, come visit, or like I said, look him up online. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you
for dropping in. Really appreciate it. And best of luck, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.